So I offered them like, hey, would you like a workshop on writing, either pitching or book writing or something that augments any business? Because the truth is, for people who are running businesses, they're talking about CEOs and people who are running businesses, writing articles or writing books are a great way to get visibility.
So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Welcome back, everyone, to Call Me CEO. This is your host, Camille Walker, and here we celebrate women and mothers building businesses that really make change, and also to give you encouragement to know that you are capable of doing incredible things. And today we are going to be talking with Leigh Shulman, who is an author and author mentor. And she helps women specifically to help them understand that they have what it takes to share a story and that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, a perfect story, a monumental movie, earth-shattering story to be worthy of writing and to also be worthy of sharing and making a change in the world. So thank you so much, Leigh, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me here. It's really great to finally meet you after sort of following you online for a while.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that too. I feel like it's so fun to sit down and have real face-to-face conversation like this, because sometimes when you're in the ethers of the internet, it feels like you're talking into the void, or you're just not sure who's connecting or listening. And so I love making one-on-one connections. So tell us more about you. And you're calling from Argentina, which is so cool. Tell us about where you're from, a little bit about you and your family and what you do.
Sure. So I'm in Argentina now, but I've traveled and moved around quite a bit. I was born in South Africa. My family moved to the US when I was little. And I won't go through all the places that I've lived and all the places we've been, but it's been a lot. And I like the change and I like moving around. And when we lived in New York before we started traveling full time, and my daughter was about 2. And really it was because getting into school was such a lot of pressure. I just felt like a 2-year-old shouldn't have to go through that to get into school, because we were in Brooklyn and it was like play dates to get into school. It was like I had to write an essay, and there was a play date and a psychological play date and then a psychological evaluation. And then it was $20,000 to send a 2-year-old to school.
Wow.
And I just felt like that's a lot. That's a lot for an adult. No 2-year-old should have to deal with that. And not knowing that there was a specific route we were going loosened us up to say, we don't really want to stay in Brooklyn anymore. So why don't we sell everything and just travel for a while? And obviously that one sentence, why don't we sell everything and travel, moves a lot faster than the process of actually making that decision and doing that. Mm-hmm. But we ended up moving around to a lot of different places and eventually made our way to Argentina, where we've been for about 15 years now.
Wow, 15 years. So you've raised your kids there then?
I guess we did. My oldest, the one who's 2 when we left New York, she's in college now in Argentina. And then we have a 10-year-old also. But while we were traveling, I didn't want to be pregnant and traveling and not know what was going on. So we ended up settling here. And then after we were certain we were going to stay, that's when we're like, all right, do we want another kid? Yes. All right, let's do this here. And then how that really set into what I do now. I've been writing for as long as I could remember, but I didn't really and I even went to grad school. I have a master's in creative writing and literature. But I don't think I really took it seriously until we started traveling. And that was when I started writing for magazines, and I got a position as an editor for an online magazine. And it just kept growing from there. I started teaching people how to write books, writing my own books. And then eventually when I started seeing that sort of these patterns that what kind of gets in the way for when we write and we want to tell a story, I built a community out of it to say. It's funny because it came out of seeing how people connect on Facebook. where someone will ask a question, particularly in a Facebook group, and everybody wants to jump in and help. But Facebook and online can sometimes get nasty, or people they don't have to stand behind what they say, or you get distracted and then you spent 2 hours doing something you didn't mean to do.
Yeah.
So I created a space where, among other things, we have a forum where we can support each other, create accountability. And it doesn't happen that nobody's a sensitive, people may tell you the truth about something, but it's always going to be in a way that helps you as opposed to tears you down. And you don't waste time. You don't waste time in the community either.
I love that. So let's talk about writing as a career really quick, because as you were traveling, were you doing traveling articles for magazines, or what kind of articles were you doing?
Yes. So while we were traveling, I was writing about travel, and also about parenting and how to parent, why you should travel with your kids, and different things that I was seeing, or articles about, oh, we just went to this place and here's what we did. Or I wrote, I think it was a blog post for different travel magazines, and or travel blogs too. And I mean, the funny thing is that at the time, I wasn't very directed about it because I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was just figuring it out as it went along. And it was also early on in travel blogging. And I leaned on a lot of people. I had a lot of friends that I met online who were also travelers who would, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? And that happened. There's actually a website called Uncornered Market. And the people who run it basically said to me, like, oh, I know this person. You should check with her. They might be looking for writers at this magazine. So I did. And then I ended up being an editor. Oddly, they never told me this. It was the life section, but they meant it to be a monologue, but they never told me that until I'd been doing it for a year. So it was more about, what does it mean to travel? Whether it's not gear, but how do you travel? What are our stories? And there was a lot of, how do you travel with kids, and what does it mean to have kids in there too?
Do you feel like that's still something that is viable for someone to do if they're wanting to pick up and do travel editing or writing for magazines?
I think it is. I think it is still viable to write for magazines. Write for magazines about the topics that you are good at. And what I mean by good at is broad, because I think when we were saying before that people have a tendency to discount their abilities and what they know. So if I say write about things that you know about or that you enjoy writing about, I think a lot of people say, I haven't done much of that, or I don't, but that's not what I mean. It's, what is it that you want to write about? And then you can learn. You can always learn and expand your scope, but you have to know what you actually want. Because if you're writing about radios and you have no interest in it, what's the point? But if you want to write about parenting and maybe you're thinking about becoming a parent, that there's already something to say there, and you can always find something to pitch. I think the big difference between how I think it makes sense to try to make a living with writing for magazines now versus when I started, and actually that's very much the core of the book that I wrote based on. It's called The Writer's Roadmap. I was all over the place, and I would try this and I would try that and do all these different things. But ultimately what that did was spread me too thin. And I would definitely say spreading yourself too thin is something writers do a lot. I think creatives in general, we have a tendency to do that. We have shiny object syndrome. We like, oh, this is a great idea. And it's great to develop ideas in what I call the chaos of creativity and like delve into all these ideas that you have. But then you really want to choose a few that you really focused on and see them to the end. So now when I work with people who want to pitch and make money pitching and writing for magazines, it's a lot more targeted. Just a few things that I would say, copy editing or copywriting, where you're writing for a magazine or writing for a business, will pay more than, say, pitching an article to a commercial publication. Or when you pitch, a lot of times people think, oh, I'll pitch and do something for free just to get my name out there. And you can do that. But my feeling is, if you're going to pitch, why not pitch where you can make more money? You might as well start, because the worst thing that happens is you say no and you move somewhere else. But if you pitch to a place that's not going to pay you anything, so great, you have a byline, but you're not being paid, so you might as well try. And
absolutely. So what would be, for someone that is considering that, and maybe we're going to talk about books in a minute, But for the magazine piece, what is a good place to start if you're thinking, I want to write for magazines and you have no connections? Like, what would be a good first step?
Okay, so the first step is read magazines. That would be the first step, because you want to pitch places where you know what they write and you know what you put in there. And I always say to people, pitch magazines that you like reading, which makes sense. But a lot of times people don't think of that, because when you love a magazine, you don't think that a lot of times I think people count themselves out and they're like, oh, they won't accept me. You don't know. You have no idea. And I've worked with people where they might have come into it like that. And the next thing they're pitching everywhere, they're writing everywhere, and they're doing exactly what they want to do because they tried. So I have to start with the magazines you love, and then go online and find out how to pitch them. And literally it's submissions, name of magazine, and you just Google that and you'll generally find the information that you need. All right, so pitching, how to pitch, what to pitch, where to pitch. There's also questions like, I'd say the biggest obstacle most people have when they start pitching is the difference between a topic and a story. Surfing in Colombia is a topic. This particular beach where people love to learn how to surf is a story. Mm-hmm. Where you're creating more of an image where someone can literally say, oh, I want to learn how to surf. I would love to go there. I bet that's a perfect place to go. Whereas surfing in Colombia is so broad, even if you're an expert at that, a magazine won't really know what you want to say. So you can really, and what that also does is surfing in Colombia could become 30 different stories that you could pitch to different magazines and different art, like for different reasons. Colombia in the summer versus Colombia in the winter. And I think there's a lot of brainstorming that happens from that. Well, what could you write? What could it be? And it's, I think, one of the times that having too many ideas where you're overwhelmed and shiny object syndrome when it comes to pitching is probably one of the best times, because you're like, oh, this idea, and then this idea, and great, and this idea. And then you go back and one by one, you start pitching them. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, how do you learn to pitch? What are the elements of it? Again, Google is your friend. There's lots of places where you can learn the basics of pitching. There's also, I give a lot of courses on pitching. I have resources on pitching, and lots of other people do too. There's enough information out there that you can learn.
Yeah.
But you have to trust yourself. Trust yourself is like I repeat that all the time. Trust yourself. You'll figure it out.
I love that mantra, because I think a lot of times, like you say, it's just a matter of doing the legwork, of putting yourself out there and saying, I'm just going to do this. When I coach people, mm-hmm. and they have, sometimes because of my background, I coach people on sponsorships. How do you pitch a sponsor? And what I suggest to them is that you think of it almost like a game, like you gamify it in a way where you're going to put out so many numbers in a week so that you get to so many numbers by the month. And then at that point, it can become a numbers game where it's more about what is the output that you're putting out, and then what you're getting back in is the bonus, where it's almost like you're challenging yourself with the part you can control. And if you look at it that way of, I have something to share, I have value, this is something that it would be really helpful to people, then it becomes less about rejection. And I think that when I get stuck or wound up in rejection, that's when I start to shut down. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. 100%. And what you were saying about putting it out there and how turning it into a numbers game, that's literally what I say to people about pitching too, mm-hmm. where the goal is to send it out. It's not to get the yes or the no. The goal is to send it out, because eventually you will get there. But and even if you, let's say you're getting all no's, then that's a sign to say, oh, let me look at my process. What's not working in this process, and get more information. I think often we have a tendency to go to, oh, there's a problem with me. Mm-hmm. Or when you said you have to learn to value yourself and say, I have something of value here, let me offer it. Sometimes people do show complete lack of value in you. That's a funny way of saying it. There was once I won't get into who they are, but there was a business that started up on 107 dates, and they were bringing all these people to do co-working, like long-term co-working, living as an expat. So I offered them, like, hey, would you like a workshop on writing, either pitching or book writing or something that augments any business. Because the truth is, for people who are running businesses, they're talking about CEOs and people who are running businesses, writing articles or writing books are a great way to get visibility. It seemed like a good match. And the way they treated me was like, oh, silly her, which to me was, all right, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to work with somebody who treats me like that. Yeah. I want to work with people who value me and treat me, that I will treat you with respect, and I value you and your work and your opinion and your expertise. But I need that too, because there's no way to have, it's not pleasant. It's unpleasant to live like that. Who wants that in your life? Don't you want to? It's not enjoyable. It's not fun work. And let alone, it's not going to move you forward in the way that you want it to move you forward.
That's such a good point, because I think that anything we do in our work, or the way that we make money, or we are helping other people, or we're writing the article, it's energy that we're putting out into the world. And if we're not matching that with energy that is appreciative or values or honors that energy we're putting out, it's not a good fit. It's not a good match. And so that's bad for both parties, I think.
Right.
So I'm curious about shifting a little bit into books, because that is something that comes up a lot. People are wanting to start a podcast and they want to write a book. That's very, I would say, a new check mark or feather in the bonnet, so to speak. And writing a book, I think you're right, with building authority and having that visibility and that storytelling. Take me through the process of what a book writer, especially as a business owner, a lot of women listening are business owners. Let's say that they have an idea of something that they would want to write a book about. How do they know if it's a viable idea, number one, or a good idea, which I think I know what you're going to say to that, but let's just put it there. And then number two, what are the steps of getting to the place of like self-publishing versus finding a publisher versus, do I do Amazon or do I do it a more traditional way? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so starting off, is an idea viable? Okay, so whether or not it's viable, there are two ways to look at that. There is when you said you think you know what I'm going to say, I think there is a sense where we will discount our stories and what we have to offer early on. And I am very big in, no, don't do that. Don't discount it. Let's talk about it. And I do that in my community. I do that one-on-one with people all the time, where no, don't shut it out. Don't shut it down before you let it exist for a little while. But I think also when you're running a business and you're working with clients, you see what your clients need and what will help them the most. And that's usually what your book is. If you're writing a nonfiction book that is meant to be authority for your business, that is very much what you would write about and what's needed. So for example, again, my book, The Writer's Roadmap, because one of the things I did for writers is, because it's so easy to not have a plan with writing, that I built one for myself. And what I was years ago was part of a business mastermind where they used the OGSM, the objectives, goals, strategies, and measures, that tool that small businesses use. So I adapted that for writers. And the real key is to not be writing 7 things at once or 20 things at once and have a million ideas, but you never finish anything. But instead have a real plan that has an objective, that has a mission, it has very clear goals, it has clear core values. And so you're building a business plan around your writing. And I was doing that in my community, and I was doing that with other people, and people kept asking me questions about it. So I'm like, instead of answering the question over and over, let me just write a book about it. So that's where my first book came from. And so I'm going to skip over the actual writing, and I'll get to that in just a second. So now let's say you have a book and you're going to decide between self-publishing and traditional publishing. Traditional publishing, it is more of a game, and not necessarily the game that you were talking about in terms of a numbers game. There's so many elements that are involved in traditional publishing that you have agents and publishers who have years of experience, not just knowing what books people want, which is definitely part of it, but also what works in the business of publishing. And so when I talk about the business of writing, I'm talking about an individual who's creating a business around their writing. When they talk about the business of writing, they're talking about the business of how you write a book, sell it, and then have it like on shelves all over the United States, which are two very different processes.
Okay. I hear what you're saying.
So whether or not your idea has legs doesn't necessarily mean self-publishing, sorry, that traditional publishing will take it. Because I know that my book, and I actually have a book on rejection that I wrote that I want to self-publish relatively soon. My book actually was, I found an agent and she started sending it out. And I don't know if it was the timing or what it was, because my agent was like, this is going to sell really quickly. And then no one wanted it. Whereas everyone I talk to one-on-one or in groups, they want that book. They want to see it. So will that necessarily, once I self-publish, will that translate into sales? Actually, I think yes, it will, because I know it's something that people need. I know it's something that people want. I know it's things that everyone that I work with grapples with on some level. Mm-hmm. So there's a space for it. There just may not be a space for a major publisher to take it and publish it right now. Because in a sense, these days, the business of writing and publishing is more about what your platform is. And they want people with massive platforms and will almost say no right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. But okay, so the process of writing the book, and that really goes down to sit down and write. Just sit down and start writing, just getting your thoughts on paper, and recognize that there's a translation process, like what you've had going on in your head. Getting it on paper may not feel as smooth as it does when you're working with somebody one-on-one. And be okay with that. Be okay for a while with that sense of awkwardness and kind of feeling uncomfortable with it, because it's part of writing. And it's part of that chaos that I keep talking about. But then on my website, if you go to my website, I have a section for writing resources, and I have writing guides. And there's a writing guide there for fiction, and there's one for nonfiction. And I say go download it and works. I call it the 5-step cheat sheet to write your book. And it takes you step by step through getting the basics on paper. So that it adds some order to that initial translation process of getting it out of your brain and onto paper, which then you can start to fill out and build it into the book that you want it to be.
I love that, having a resource for breaking it down, just the skeleton of it. I actually have a friend that just wrote a book a few months ago, and she did an audio dump where she just took a whole day and she had someone with her to help ask those questions. And she recorded audio and she wrote it in a day, which is amazing and very unique to her. I don't know that everyone could do that because that's a lot, but she said it just flowed out of her, which is really cool. I feel like if you have a mentor, whether it's like a written outline or you want to record it with audio, which is awesome, that's an option. Sometimes we do flow differently, but I think having a mentor in either scenario is a really good idea, because sometimes it can get you thinking of something in a way that you wouldn't have already thought of on your own.
Absolutely. I've seen that happen before. Was her book a nonfiction book? Because when you've been doing something, you've been thinking about something, but particularly if you've been applying and implementing it with yourself or with other people, the process. And for nonfiction books tend to be more process driven. There have been many times, but the first time it happened was like amazing, where I sat down with somebody and we had a 1-hour one-on-one. And in that time, we basically sat down and outlined her entire book based on what was already in her head. It was just me asking questions. She had the full book and she knew exactly what she wanted to do with it and exactly where she wanted to go. And now she just had to fill in the blanks. And I suspect a lot of the people that you work with or we listen to your podcast are in that space where you've been doing something, you're an expert. You know what the process is, where people get stuck, where the obstacles are, what people tell themselves or how to get past them. And so it becomes really easy to write the book.
Yeah.
But I think, yes, having a structure really helps that, or having somebody to bounce it off of you really helps that. And I have to say, I actually have a page on my website that's specifically for your podcast listeners, that if they want to, it's a form and you send in an email, and it's just to say, hey, let's have a chat if you want to talk about what you want in your book. And then you can decide what you want. If we chat, you decide after that what you want to do.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, especially for people who have been on stages or taken people through a transformation of some kind, or whether it's your own personal story, that you've been writing a book your whole life. It's really just putting it into a format that can be digestible for someone else picking up the book and taking that journey with you, which I think is really empowering. So as far as using your book as a tool for business growth, what are some best practices that you've seen for people taking their ideas, putting it into a book, and then using it to grow their business?
So when you have a book and you want to help it develop authority, you want to reach more people, because Amazon has a bigger reach than probably most of us.
Mm-hmm.
The reason a book is so good, I think there's two sides to it. One side of it is it's a tool, and it's a really fascinating and really strong marketing tool, really powerful marketing tool, where you have no idea where your book is going to go. You have no idea who's going to find it. You just know that you've put your information there and it will make its way out there. So that's when it comes to your book, it's about giving it to people, sharing it, putting it in your bylines, putting it in your email signatures, and just really letting it go out and see where it ends up. The other part of writing a book that I find really powerful is it directs you to your next step. Because I saw so for my writer's roadmap, that's what the writer's roadmap, paving your way to your ideal writing life. One of the biggest obstacles to all of that, so people would make their plans and they would write when they're in that plan, I'm like, okay, to begin with, through sheet 3 goals, meaning 3 main projects. So maybe your goal is, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to look for my clients, and I'm going to build my writing platform. And you don't go and do a million other projects. You really allow that to stick. Or maybe you're like, okay, I've just written a book. Now it's time to get it out there. So I'm going to market it. What am I going to market it? How am I developing my platform? But what would happen, and I saw this happen quite often, is people would get so scared of rejection that they would have the whole plan. They'd have all the information. They'd have all these pitches. They'd have all this information. But then they wouldn't take it to the next step because they were so concerned about rejection. Because I always say this, like, you reject yourself before you've had a chance to be rejected. Like, oh no, that'll never happen. Or that magazine it's too big a name for me. Or, yeah, I wrote this book, but I'm not going to query it because they're going to say no. And so I wrote an entire book on rejection that it literally starts back from like prehistory, where this impetus for fear of rejection comes from. And I work through that's the first section. I work through our education system is based on pass or fail. Or in our education system, depending on where you are, on a scale of 1 to 10, 6 is failing. Whereas when you're pitching, if a person got 60% of their pitches accepted, that just doesn't even happen. Like, that's way beyond the percentages that people ever get. If you're getting 20% of your pitches accepted, which is deep failure in school, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
It's the same thing I'm sure with when you're talking about partnerships and sponsorships. Like, you don't have 70 to 80 to 90% of people being like, yeah, I would love to work with you. Mm-hmm. And if you are, it means you're not aiming high enough. Mm-hmm. So that level of so-called success is actually saying you're not putting yourself out there enough. Whereas that's not the case in school. We take our 90s or 95s or 98 and go, oh, I got an A. Yeah. And that does not set us up well for rejection, as opposed to rejection being a place of learning. And then most of the book are these, what I call tools. It's a toolbox of different ways you can approach rejection so you can make it work for you. How do you learn from rejection? How do you take the next step? And I think there were 18 different tools in it. And so, of course, you're not like, just like any toolbox, you're not going to go in any toolbox, take everything in it and then try to reuse them all. Use the ones that work for you. So you can see how my first book led directly to my second book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So for your perspective with helping people to write these books, would you say that it's less about selling great numbers of these books and more about using it as an asset for business growth?
I think it's both. I think it depends who you are and what your goals are. And that always goes back to what's your plan? What's your business plan? What is it you want? If your business plan is, I'm going to write and self-publish this book and I want to sell 500,000 copies, and that serves your bigger plan, then it is about numbers. For me, I self-published because I really wanted to have a book where people would ask me questions and to be like, here's my book, you can have it. Or to have something that's out there in the world that's representing my work when I'm not there. That's another role for it. So it really depends on it. For me, it always goes down to what is it that you want and what is your plan? And then how does this fit as a tool for your overall goals?
Yeah, I like that. That's really cool. So, with everyone that you have helped to write a book, do you have a story that you could share with us of success of someone that you saw who maybe doubted themselves and then was able to put a book out into the world?
Oh, see, there's so many different people and there's so many different types of success and different things. But I think, because I've worked with people at so many different stages of their writing process. I think there's somebody who came to me where she wanted to write a book about, it's funny, I'm thinking of so many different things that I'm having trouble focusing on it. But I want to first, if it's okay, I want to first tell one story of a person who, her book, she had an idea for a book. It was a fantastic idea for a book. People would hear about the idea and agents and publishers would come to her and say, when you write this book, let me know. And we wrote it and she was ready for her almost final draft. And then she disappeared. And it was a beautiful book. And it actually related to what's going on in Israel and Palestine right now. And it was a story about connection and how people can work together, which you can see how people would want to know more about that. And then also how relevant it would be now. And then she was supposed to come back to me with her, we'd written, taking notes on it and been working on it. And she was supposed to make some edits and then come back to me. And I didn't hear from her for 2 years. And after 2 years, she came back, she said, I'm still working on it, I'll get back to you. And that was maybe 4 years ago, and I haven't heard from her since. And that book has a place. That book has a place. And it still has a place. It had a place then, it has a place now. The world is waiting for that book. And I can't stop thinking about it as write your book, finish your book. Mm-hmm. Then on the other side, and one that I think is an element of success, there's a woman that I worked with who, she did write a book. And in the process of us working together, we're talking about mindset, the different elements that we always talk about, mindset and how to move forward and how to craft a book and how to do all these different things. What she did finish it, and now she's querying the book. But what also happened in that process is she realized she wanted to do travel writing and completely shifted her career and is now a full-time travel writer, writing for different magazines. She lives in Costa Rica and she basically she's from the US but lives in Costa Rica, is now a representative for Costa Rica. She's planning on moving somewhere else for a while. So she really took writing and all the things that we did together for her book. And then there were a lot of other questions about how do I do this and how do I do that sort of talked more about a more holistic writing life and all the different elements. Because writing a book is one element. And she completely changed everything she wanted to do. And now she is travel and writing about her travel and helping people do what she does, which is you want to retire to another country, you want to travel full time, here's how. So I would call that a success story.
Yeah. Oh, I love both of those. And I can tell that your heart is really in it thinking about that. That would be heartbreaking to see such a beautiful story be just sitting on the shelf, so to speak, of get it out because it would help so many people. And I think at the end of the day, that's the message for this episode is that there's a story within you and something of value that you have to share. And those stories are waiting to come out. So I know that you, Leigh, have some programs that you can tell us about where you help people to do that.
So I work with people in different ways. So one of the main ways that I work with people is through my writing community that's called the Inspired Writer Community. And it's a place, it's another toolbox. I'm very big on the idea of toolboxes because the idea is you create your plan. You know what you want, you know what's best for you. You create a plan, and then you use the different elements of the toolbox to make that plan happen. And part of that is accountability, community support. Those are very big and important elements of it. Mm-hmm. And a mindset, shifting your mindset from, oh, I don't know if I can do this to, I'm gonna try and see where I go. And be open to the possibilities at the end of it. Because as we were talking, I'm going to move back a little bit into what we were saying, as we were talking about putting a book out there and braving rejection, let's say you write a book and you put it out there, or you go for a sponsorship and you get one. You don't know where you're going to grow past that, because you won't know until you see how people relate to what you've put out there. So if you cut yourself off before you put it out there, or you've tried, you've just cut it off. You don't even know what you've cut off yet. Okay, so that's the community. And it's all about, what are the possibilities here? What amazing things can you do? And then I also work with people one-on-one to write books and also to put together the writing roadmaps. And so that really comes into, so I'm working with a woman now where she left her full-time job. She's been working it for 25 years and left. She gave notice that she's still on the job. And now she has like a year to set things up for herself as a writer. So that's what we're working on now. And it's really exciting to see that. So I work with people to write books and to work with people to figure out what their writing life is going to be and how that's going to fit into their lives. And then I run writing retreats. So where I live in Argentina, people come here and spend a week. A nice mix of travel, being an expat, and getting and believing in yourself and your story.
Oh, that's awesome. I love to wrap up my show with 2 questions. One, well, this is like a 3-in-1, is what are you reading, writing, or listening to? So that's your first. And then the second is a motherhood moment that you want to share. And it could be related to your business. It could be something sentimental, funny, whatever you want to share.
Okay. What I'm reading right now is, what is it? Demon Copperfield. And I am struggling. I am really struggling. That doesn't happen to me very often, because it's about a like 11-year-old. Right now, I'm like a third of the way through, and it's an 11-year-old boy, and everything goes wrong for him. And actually, I've been on Threads and I asked for book recommendations. I've been slowly working my way through all the book, like literally hundreds and hundreds of book recommendations. Everyone loved this book, and I'm just having such a hard time with it.
And it's called Demon Copperfield?
Demon Copperfield by Barbara Kingsolver.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd be a do not read, which I don't do very often. I don't know if I'm going to do not finish it.
Yeah.
We'll see. And what I'm writing right now, which is very close to my heart, it's a sort of the final draft of a book that I've been working on. It's a YA book. I write nonfiction, and that serves my business, and I self-publish it. But then I've just fallen into writing YA fiction, because I just really enjoy it. I just enjoy where it comes from, and it's fun, and I get to explore. And this one takes place 300 years in the future, right where I live in Argentina, so in the mountains, in the Andes Mountains in Argentina. But the key of it is it's plants, like in the way that the movie Fantastic Beasts, really, like they have all those fantastic beasts. This one, it's all about the plants. And so I used to study herbal medicine. But the plants, like, they are alive. Like, plants are alive, but they take on a life of their own, and they're actual characters. And they do stuff, and they get involved in things. And it's just really fun to write. So I had finished it, sent it out for publication, got a whole bunch of notes back on that. I got rejected, got a bunch of notes, and now I'm doing the next draft. And then the motherhood moment. Okay, so this is a life is messy kind of motherhood moment.
Yeah.
Things get really chaotic really quickly.
Is there anything else other than life is messy? I don't know.
I think that's how it has to be, because like in those messy moments, like that's where the most revelation and creativity comes from. Knowing what you're doing all the time is overrated, I think. When I look at my life, and I was saying when I started writing, I had no idea what I was doing. I feel like the best things that are in my life now began with, I have no idea what I'm doing. And just like I said, I'll figure it out is my life's mantra. Okay, I'll figure it out. And that applies to anything. Like, when we first moved here, we got stranded in the desert in Chile. Our car broke down in the middle of the desert, and there was no one around. So it applies then. So literally, we'll figure it out. And a tour bus came by.
Take us with you.
I know. I couldn't believe it. We happened to break down in the middle of the desert, which happened to be a tourist route. And all these people came out of the bus, and they pushed our car out of the sand because we were stopped. And then we finished the tour with them as well. Yeah, we're not going to try that again. But so it applies again, it applies to writing books, it applies to traveling the world, it applies to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday, my son, Charlie, he's 10, he had 2 friends over, and I've been really busy preparing for this writing event that I told you about that I'm doing in November, just as an introduction to people to the community, and you can try some things out and see the kind of workshops I do and see if it's for you. So I've been busy and walked in my office, and I went down checking in what's going on. And all of a sudden I saw one of them had like fireworks in his hand, and he started and a lighter, and he started trying to light it.
What, in your house?
Yes, in our house. Like, where did he get the fireworks? This is a kid. He's so funny. He's a really good friend of my son's. Charlie's really good friend. And he's the kind of kid that always finds stuff that you didn't know you had, or that you thought you lost and you never see again. And it ends up in his hand. Oh, yeah. So he was like, yeah, he tried to light one of the, it's a little one, but I still didn't. And thankfully they didn't, there were some, not bottle rockets. Yeah, these were bottle rockets. They were much bigger. We must have bought them somebody must have bought them for New Year's here. And they've been uncovered. So I don't know how we found them.
Oh my gosh. You're like, don't touch that. Oh.
I know. And there were they were thankfully not lit. They didn't try to light them, but they were like little things like sparklers and all over the house. So
that's hilarious.
Yesterday.
Oh, that's so funny. This has been so enlightening. I feel like if you are wanting to write a story, you have an idea within you, reach out to Leigh. She'll do a free discovery call with you. We'll make sure to put the links in the description and the show notes below. And if you found this episode helpful, please leave a 5-star rating and review. Any review and rating for the podcast helps other people to see it and discover it and to find inspiration to chase after their dreams too. So Leigh, thank you so much for being on the show today. Hey CEOs, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please let me know in a comment and a 5-star review. You could have the chance of being a featured review on an upcoming episode. Continue the conversation on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. And remember, you are the boss.